There was little Jeffrey Epstein wouldn't do to satisfy his lust for young women and girls. He spent millions masterminding a worldwide sex trafficking operation, and a year ago he was arrested. A month after that, he died in custody, under suspicious circumstances. Investigators, though, refused to let this scandal go to the grave with Epstein. They shifted their attention to his high-profile friends, among them Prince Andrew, who continues to dodge requests from the FBI for an interview. But now there's been a substantial breakthrough with the arrest of socialite Ghislaine Maxwell, accused of being Epstein's right-hand woman. She's been charged with multiple child sex offences, and for the first time in a long time, the countless victims in this wicked saga are feeling relief instead of terror. St. James in the Virgin Islands is a picture-perfect playground for the super-rich, but it's never been seen like this before. This now abandoned island is the keeper of terrible secrets. This is a place haunted by what went on here, at the hands of the now-dead Jeffrey Epstein, a man who knew no limits. Epstein was driven to sexually abuse countless young girls, his private sanctuary and isolated prison known as Pedo Island, where he would share the girls like prey with his rich and powerful friends. Just last week, Ghislaine Maxwell, the most wanted woman in the world, was found hiding out in New Hampshire. Now a criminal investigation on Epstein's Caribbean island exposes the true extent of this predator's shocking behaviour. The biggest fallout are the allegations of Virginia Roberts. Amongst many others, she claims Epstein trafficked her to Prince Andrew 3 times, the first in London when she was 17, then once again in New York, and the third and final time in the Virgin Islands. Prince Andrew, close friends with Ghislaine Maxwell, denies the allegations. Prince Andrew met Epstein through Maxwell, a British socialised daughter of disgraced media baron Robin Maxwell, with Ghislaine Maxwell's arrest. Another victim was Maria Farmer. She was a gifted student at the New York Academy of Art, and she met patrons Jeffrey Epstein and Maxwell. Jeffrey fell in love with Maria's art, bought her first major work, and hired her in 1995 to buy art for his New York mansion. During that year, she had a front row seat to what went on behind these closed doors, and also Maxwell in full flight. Epstein claimed to help manage Victoria's Secret, and Maxwell was his model scout, happily procuring girls to feed Epstein's insatiable appetite. Maria alleges that they brought me to the gala and escorted me to Jeffrey's room, and he's lying there and he goes, well, here, sit down, and so right next to him, and then he lies on the other side. And they began assaulting me. But really, while I was lying there the whole time, I'm thinking my sister has been around these people. Maria's sister was 16, and she was around them alone. Maria's fears were well-founded. Her younger sister, Annie, revealed she too was sexually abused by the pair. Maria went to the FBI. It was 1996, and she was the very first victim to officially report Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell to the authorities. But in a pattern that would be set in the decades ahead, her complaint was ignored. They just kept it all quiet, she said, put it in the bottom drawer, and they're so dismissive, she felt daunted and stopped going to the police. Maria felt the full force of Maxwell's fury. Terrified, Maria went into hiding and gave up her art career. Maria alleged that Ghislaine started threatening her with things like, I'm going to burn your arts, and then I'm going to burn your career, and then I'm going to burn you and the house you live in. And then it was, oh, be careful crossing a street. You can get shot in the back of the head. These were the threats against my life, and I told the FBI this. In July last year, Jeffrey Epstein was finally arrested and charged with sex trafficking a minor. Epstein was arrested aboard his private jet. For years, he'd used his wealth and power to avoid the full brunt of the law. The charges alleged that Epstein sexually abused young girls by enticing them to engage in sex acts for money. But finally, he was apprehended in New York. His bail was refused, and with no other way out, lawyer Brad Edwards believes Epstein killed himself in prison. Despite some speculation, he was murdered. Edwards said, I think once his bond was revoked, his world just crashed in and the only control he had left was over his life. So hearing directly from a victim is the only way that anyone's really going to understand. Brad represents victims and describes Epstein as a genius sociopath, one of his most confounding and dangerous adversaries. He was charming, charismatic, funny. He made you want to like him. That's why he was able to access over 100 young girls and do the kind of things that he was able to do. You speak about his charisma and charm, but he sort of had a double whammy, didn't he? Because he was always implying threats that he could and would hurt you. He would make no bones about that. He could inflict harm. He might say, I'll tell you what, if you keep prosecuting me this way, if you keep doing this, someone is going to get hurt. And so clearly it was a threat. There's no other way to perceive it. But his delivery was as non-threatening as possible. In the early 90s, the well-connected Christina Oxenberg, a member of the Serbian royal family and a cousin to the British royals, met Epstein and GHISLAINE Maxwell, procuring girls for him and sometimes joining in the abuse. She wanted me to believe that she was Jeffrey's girlfriend, but I knew that she was not what she wanted to be. That had to be the storyline. With Epstein's death, Maxwell went on the run, but Christina remembers the time when both Maxwell and Epstein were desperate to be seen. They were a perfect fit, she said. They needed each other. They were both halves of a whole that they wanted to be. He had the money, she had the connections. When Epstein's arrest last year made headlines, Christina was moved to call the FBI. So disturbed was she by what GHISLAINE Maxwell had told her in private all of those years. She was very cocky, she said, and she told me that she had just got a helicopter pilot license, and that as a gift or reward, Jeffrey had bought her a helicopter. And I said to her, so dangerous, why would you want to do that? And she said, well, because this way we have total control on privacy of who's doing what with us. And Maxwell let her in on another secret, this time about the infamous Lolita Express, their private plane used to transport young girls and high-profile friends, including Bill Clinton. She also told me in that meeting that the private plane that she and Jeffrey used was wired for video. In 2005, an investigation started into Epstein for the sexual abuse of more than 40 young girls in Florida. Prosecutors had the evidence and the opportunity to put this sexual predator away for life. Instead, Epstein negotiated a secret deal. He pled guilty to the lesser charge of unlawfully paying for sex with the teenager, for which he'd served just over a year in jail. In return, all other charges were dropped. And incredibly, his co-conspirators, including Maxwell, were given full immunity in Florida, but only for the crimes committed there between 2001 and 2007. Not only was he able to get away with dozens, if not hundreds of crimes, but also somehow get immunity for his co-conspirators, named and unnamed. It's something that even judges who have reviewed this case have never seen. With Maxwell's immunity deal in Florida, and since the criminal investigation had run cold, she settled into a luxury hideout, aptly tucked away in New Hampshire. It seems Maxwell didn't count on being chased down for her crimes outside the immunity period. At a remote court hearing last week, where reporters could only listen in thanks to COVID, Maxwell's disbelief could be heard. They say they heard a very loud British woman screaming, "Why is this happening? How is this happening? How could this happen?" and just crying her eyes out. Maxwell was among Epstein's closest associates and helped him exploit girls who were as young as 14 years old. Maxwell has been charged with multiple child sex abuse offences relating to the Epstein sex ring, as well as perjury for lying about it under oath. As the world played the Where's Maxwell guessing game, FBI investigators knew all along, waiting for the right time to strike. The FBI were keeping tabs on Maxwell's whereabouts as they worked the investigation, and more recently they learned that she went to a gorgeous property in New Hampshire, continuing to live a life of privilege while her victims lived with the trauma inflicted upon them years ago. Haunted by that trauma, Virginia Roberts was not only abused by Epstein and Maxwell, but also trafficked by them. Virginia is now married and lives in Queensland. Jeffrey Epstein's paradise getaway in the Virgin Islands may now lie abandoned and desolate, but it holds the secret of a sex trafficking ring, even more extensive than first thought. The Attorney General of the Virgin Islands, Denise George, paints a terrifying picture of what confronted the young women who found themselves trapped there. These young girls and women were subject to sexual assault, sexual exploitation through coercion, false imprisonment, where their passports at some point were taken away, and it was quite a number of women, at least up to 2018. Last month, the Duke of York's legal team released a statement claiming he was cooperating with the FBI investigation. The Duke of York has, on at least 3 occasions this year, offered his assistance as a witness to the Department of Justice. In turn, last week, Prince Andrew yet again sought to falsely portray himself to the public as eager and willing to cooperate. The US Department of Justice released its own statement denying Prince Andrew was telling the truth. According to Virginia's lawyer David Bowles, this is an extraordinary step. It's very significant in terms of the extent to which the Department of Justice feels Prince Andrew has simply stonewalled. The Department of Justice wants to interview him as a witness, as someone who was present at the sex trafficking, someone who was close to Jeffrey Epstein. The other thing that they are obviously going to look at is Prince Andrew as a participant. For the record, Prince Andrew has been on Epstein's private plane, he's been to the private island, he stayed at his home in Palm Beach, visited Maxwell's house in London. This is just the beginning. There were so many women in Epstein's orbit that participated, procured and benefited from Epstein's sickness. Epstein was dirty, he was sick, he was a pedophile. Now he's gone. Maxwell is the wicked one, and these women with her, they deserve the same punishment. They deserve to be taken down as well. So this is just the beginning.